Short introduction. Like Jay mentioned, I'm Niels. I'm the CTO of Spherion, a document and content services API platform provider. And I have some other roles as well. I'm also the CTO of a clinical trial company. It's called Trial, how original, with an extra L, by the way. I'm the chairman of the Blockchain Innovation Foundation, which is a Dutch non-profit that basically promotes blockchain usage, blockchain software, and blockchain infrastructure. And besides that, I'm a Factum protocol guide, meaning I am responsible, along with a colleague like Julian, to make up the governance for the public Factum blockchain. Right beside me is Julian Fletcher-Taylor. He will introduce himself.
Hi. So I'm the CEO of DBGrow. We build out open source technologies on top of the Factum blockchain. Additionally, I'm a guide like Niels. And we're going to be presenting one of the new technologies that we've created, released this week.
Okay. Just first a little bit of an introduction to the current use cases of Factum. And when I'm talking about Factum, I'm talking about the public Factum blockchain. Factum is basically a blockchain that allows you to prove stuff, prove things, prove documents, prove of authenticity, proof of existence. Did a certain document exist at a certain point in time, and hasn't it been changed? Proof of audit, proof that a certain document has been changed according to a set of rules, and that you can record the document going from one revision to another revision, and that you can track that. Proof of process, proof that a new document has been created and that it has been linked to a previous document, just like I mentioned before. I switched them up. And the interesting thing is that it allows you to have a document and show a set of documents, for instance, and prove what the set of documents hasn't been tampered with, hasn't been changed, and is fully authentic and still the same as it was before. Even when, for instance, there has been one letter being changed in the document, you will know. And that is what Factum is known for. It's a public blockchain. It's a blockchain with a cryptocurrency. And it's not as sexy as most of the other cryptocurrencies maybe, but it has a specific use case, mostly targeted for companies and enterprises. I'm going to get a little bit technical, and that's just to show the new possibilities that the Factum blockchain will bring in the future. Basically, the Factum blockchain allows you to store all kinds of data into the blockchain. And the most predominant use case is the proof. And the proof is being created by creating digital fingerprints of data, of documents. That proof is being created by a process called hashing. And a hash is a one-way function. If you have a document or if you have an information object, you can create a hash, and you can always recreate that same hash of that document, and that hash will always be the same. So it is comparable to a fingerprint. That fingerprint is a one-way fingerprint. So if you have a document, you can create a fingerprint, but if you have the fingerprint, you cannot go back to the original content of the document. Why is that important? Of course, you don't want everybody to know all kinds of documents you are proving. There may be legal documents, there may be confidential documents. So those documents, they don't reside on the blockchain, only those fingerprints reside on the blockchain. And whenever I send a document, and you wouldn't fully trust me, you are able to just verify that the content I've sent you is indeed correct and has been registered at a certain date, at a certain time, and that nothing has changed. How this is done internally is by allowing you to store all kinds of entries into the blockchain basically in your own chains on top of the Factum protocol. And like I mentioned, you can store anything you like. So you can make chains, for instance, for a certain type of documents that are related to each other. You can create chains about metadata about documents, and you can link those chains all together. One of the new use cases coming to Factum is the so-called decentralized identifiers. Because of the structures of those chains and entries, it has a really nice technical way of putting all kinds of data on it and creating a hierarchy of data. And that is a really nice platform to also allow digital identities. And what is a digital identity? It is an identity that you can create yourself. So you are the owner of the identity. And when you create an identity yourself, you might say, okay, but normally a company creates an identity for me, or the governments create an identity for me. What is this worth? Well, actually, it's worth quite a lot, because if you create an identity, people can start attesting to your identity. It allows you, for instance, to sign off on data, and the more you sign off on data, the more people will trust you. And it also allows you to have identities to people. It allows you to create identities for devices. It allows you to create identities for organizations, but also, for instance, for documents. And when everything has an identity, you can start combining those identities. So, for instance, if I create a digital identity for myself, there is a digital identity for my organization, Spherion. There is a digital identity for my tablet or my laptop. And there are digital identities for documents. If I start combining these, I could create signatures for documents where I can prove that I have been the one that has signed it, that I'm related to the company called Spherion, and that it has been signed on my laptop, for instance. If you look at what decentralized identities are, decentralized identities are anchored by blockchain IDs linked to zero trust data stores that are universally discoverable. That's a mouthful, especially for a Dutch guy. What I was talking about is that the zero trust of the storage is something that is not happening on the blockchain itself. So if I want to store something about my identity, you're not going to store it on the blockchain itself, because you don't want to have personally identifiable information on a permanent blockchain. It's really bad because you can never get it off, and if it falls into the wrong hands, well, you are screwed, basically. So what you do is you store all kinds of data outside of the blockchain. It could be traditional storage solutions, and you store the trust of that data onto the blockchain itself. And as I explained, using the fingerprint technique, using hashes, you can prove that the data that is off the blockchain hasn't been changed. And the decentralized identities and identifiers allow you to create URLs, just like you type up in the browser. You type an address and you get into a website. Decentralized identifiers are exactly the same. They are just like an URL. They just have a scheme and have an implementation. In this case, it's Factum, but could be another ledger as well. So it could be the Ethereum blockchain, it could be the Bitcoin blockchain. And this allows you to point to all kinds of data that you can validate. Cross-ledger, meaning I can have data on the Factum blockchain, I can have data on a sovereign blockchain, and combine those data together, for instance. The decentralized identities allow you to authenticate yourself using so-called public and private keys. It also allows you to authenticate yourself using normal usernames and passwords. It allows you to authenticate yourself using biometrics. And it also allows you, if you know what type of document you are looking for, based on the content, to look up that document on the blockchain. And like I mentioned, the document itself isn't on the blockchain. You're just using the blockchain like a phone book to retrieve the document. So in the decentralized identifier, there is a room to actually store access mechanisms to the data, or to APIs, or to websites, or to verify information. So if you have a decentralized identity document, you can just look up all the data in that document, and you can traverse to the exact location where the document has been stored. And if you have the credentials to access it, you can retrieve that document off-chain. It is really technical, so sorry if there are some non-technical people in here that maybe lost me there for a bit, but it allows us in the future to add proof to all kinds of data that is distributed across the globe, basically, using the blockchain as a phone book. Decentralized identities and identifiers are the roadblocks to additional use cases. Additional use cases like verifiable claims, for instance, which are also coming to Factum. And verifiable claims is basically a qualification, an achievement, a diploma, a name, a government ID, something somebody else assigns to you, and something that other entity is the only entity that allows it to assign it to you. Your driver license, your name, for instance, the city or the government knows your name. They are the ones that can assign it to you, and then that can prove that I am Niels Klomp using my driver license or using a passport, for instance. How does that work? For instance, what if in a digital age I would like to show that I have a certain degree from a university? Now I must create a scan or something of my original paper document, and well, if I would be getting another job, the people in the room just have to trust that the digital document I have sent them, that it isn't fake. If you do scans, it's really easy to manipulate data, and that's what happens a lot. Actually, you can even buy diplomas on the internet, of course. In some countries you have registries for diplomas, but in most countries you don't. So they need to trust you, basically. And using verifiable claims, you can change that around. What if I would like to prove that I had a certain diploma? If the university would basically state that I have a certain diploma, because I asked them to, and if they put the proof, basically the fingerprint of that claim, onto the blockchain, then I can prove I have that certain diploma. But why would they trust that? Because if I would state I have that diploma, you still have the same problem as we had using a scan. The reason why you can trust it is because it was actually the university signing off on the fact that I have a certain diploma. And how does that work? In the end, you will need those decentralized identifiers I talked about earlier to make sure that every piece of information on the blockchain you are able to validate those, and you are able to retrieve, if you would like, the underlying data off-chain. What are those use cases? Well, of course, you have diplomas. You could think about security personnel. You can think about certain qualifications you need to prove to others. But one of the use cases that probably will immediately show what's possible is what if I'm entering, for instance, a liquor shop. In the Netherlands, where I'm from, you have to be 18 years of old. I think in here you have to be 21 years old. Well, I'm old enough to prove that I'm over 21. Probably Julian might have a slight problem, I'm not sure. If I would have an app or something like that, or if the liquor store created an app, and I would enter the liquor store, and the people in front of me would ask, okay, but are you really 18 or are you really 21? If I could prove in the app, showing my picture and showing that, for instance, they are asking whether I'm 18 years old, that it has been validated by, for instance, my government or even my bank, and they trust the signature of the bank, of course, then they also trust them because they have done their KYC process that I'm 18 years old. Another example is, for instance, if you would log into a website where you must be 21 years of age. In a traditional profile, for instance, for Facebook or something like that, you would have a lot of information in there. The same for the use case about the liquor store. If I show my driver license, there is my name on it, there's my birth date, the type of driver license I have. Way too much to only show that I'm actually over 18. If you use a system like this and you use it to access websites, you are in control of your own data. Meaning, all the data isn't on the blockchain. I decide what I want to share with others, and I am in control when I share it with others. So, only thing I am providing to the website is, okay, this is the location where you can get additional information. And if they want to retrieve that information, I will get a signal stating, okay, it's okay to retrieve that information. So it's about creating your own identities. It's about being in control of your own data and making sure the Facebooks and the Googles of this world don't have a full profile of you. There are some technicals to that to make sure they cannot profile you. I won't get into that because that's going to be very technical, and this is already pretty technical. So I'll leave it up to Julian.
Okay. I was a late-minute addition, so my slides are not as nice. But I want to talk a little bit about the technology that my company, DBGrow, released earlier this week, actually. What we've created is what we're calling the Factum Asset Token platform or protocol, also called the FAT protocol. So what this is it's a tokenization protocol for the Factum blockchain. So let me talk about tokenization really quick. Basically, the idea is representing assets in a packaged form, most notably on the blockchain. And so the idea here is that you can take something like a piece of real estate, and you can break this up into a bunch of little pieces and tokenize it. What this allows me to do is it allows me to, for example, sell somebody a fractional ownership in a piece of property. This brings a huge amount of efficiency and liquidity to these asset markets, and also allows functionality like tying it into a digital identity to prove certain things. As well as doing things like paying out interest and dividends on ownership tokens directly to the addresses that you hold those tokens, which is extremely efficient. So FAT is a data-only protocol. What this means is that it is represented purely as data within the Factum blockchain, along with a rule validation engine running on top of Factum. So what pure data means is that we can easily integrate it into other functionalities like digital identities or DApps, and we can do that very efficiently. It also means that the actual technology is extremely efficient. Computation is completely separated from the actual storage of the data. So computation is deferred up to the people actually validating the information within the blockchain. And so this efficiency bleeds over into cost. On the Factum Asset Token Protocol, it costs 1.2 cents to do a token issuance, and it costs 1/10 of a cent to transact tokens. If you're looking at something like Ethereum, I actually checked this morning, the most recent crypto kitty token that was issued cost $1.72. On the FAT protocol, the first one you issued would cost 1.2 cents, and then subsequent issuances would cost 1/10 of a cent. So that's 1/1720th the cost. The reason for that, specifically with CryptoKitty tokens, is that they are what's called non-fungible tokens. This means that the token is non-divisible, is uniquely identifiable, and is trackable. This is in contrast to fungible tokens, which are like Bitcoin, which work as basically balances within an address. For non-fungible tokens, you need a lot more data to be able to represent the tokens. And so Factum is extremely well suited for high data loads. So when you need to represent non-fungible tokens, Factum is a perfect blockchain to do so. In something like Ethereum, EOS, Bitcoin, they vary in the cost for data entry, but you can be looking at like $3 per kilobyte. On Factum, it's a static 1/10 of a cent per kilobyte. So it's perfectly suited for that. Then what this pure data and data validation allows us to do is it basically allows us to create rules about the data. This allows us to natively express smart contract functionality directly within our protocols. So for example, a double spend, that's something that, that's basically a rule. It's just a rule we're all very familiar with. You can't spend your token twice. But something like a token expiring after 2018 is also just a rule about the token, a rule about the data. And then something like you can only pay across certain vertices in a graph that's embedded into the protocol, which means that I could send tokens to him, but I could not send tokens to her. That's also just a rule. It's just a more complex rule. And with the Factum Asset Token Protocol, we can write basically arbitrarily complex rules into this validation engine and create, natively express smart contract functionality, which is really exciting, and do so extremely efficiently. So basically, in all, what we end up with is an extremely efficient, flexible, modular, and cheap tokenization smart contract protocol built directly into the Factum blockchain. And then lastly, the FAT. What is the meaning of FAT? This stands for Factum Asset Token Protocol, but it also has a double meaning. I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with the Union Square Venture thesis on what a FAT protocol is compared to a thin protocol. The idea is a FAT protocol is one that is able to capture value within the actual protocol. Whereas thin protocols like the internet generate a lot of value, but that's all captured at the application layer. And the Factum blockchain itself is probably the best example of a FAT blockchain protocol. It's able to really effectively capture value. Every single entry, every single chain creation captures value in the actual Factum blockchain through the token. And so the Factum Asset Token is built into that, and so that's the double meaning, is that it's built into a FAT protocol. And so I think, yeah, that's about all I have.
Okay. Onto some actual examples, because this has probably been, from both sides, a bit technical. If you look at identities and if you look at the FAT protocol Julian mentioned about, this is, for instance, a use case Verin is currently building on top of FAT, together with several cities in the Netherlands. These cities have all kinds of similar problems, and the problem being that they have inhabitants, and some of those inhabitants are more low-income inhabitants, for instance, and they get some money from the government or from the city. For instance, to send your kid to swimming lessons, or for instance to buy some clothes. And that happens, people don't get real money for that, because otherwise it would be spent on other goods or other services. So it happens on paper. People get vouchers or people get cards, and there is also a certain stigma to that. It is the city that gives those people those vouchers. Those vouchers can be paid, between quotes, at, for instance, a museum or at the swimming pool. And then the shop owner, for instance, has to bring back those vouchers to the city and to get paid. And it's all administrative work. It's taking the city really long time to pay, for instance, the shop owner. We have a city, it's a small city, especially compared to cities over here in the Netherlands. It's something like 120,000 inhabitants. They have a clothing exhibit twice a year, and during that exhibit, all kinds of shop owners come to a central place, a big market, and that's where those people can buy the clothes. And it's only twice a year, it's 2 days a year, but it takes the city several weeks to process that. And what we have created is creating 2 applications that you can use on your smartphone. First application is for the inhabitant, and they can just download that in the App Store. They are being invited by the city, and because they have been awarded, for instance, a certain amount of tokens for clothing in 2018. And once they start using that application, they register the application using the letter they got from the city. Once they register, they get distributed a certain amount of tokens they can only spend on clothing. And they can only spend, for instance, in 2018. They can only spend it at the shops that are also providing clothing. So they cannot spend it at something else. They also cannot spend it, they cannot, for instance, transfer the tokens to another inhabitant, because that would be the smart thing to do. No, they can only spend it to buy clothes. The shop owner also has an app, and basically the shop owner just scans the app of the person in front of him. The person in front of him has a QR code on top of his phone, basically identifying the person. Then the shop owner scans that QR code and inputs the amount of tokens the people in front of him wants to buy. And the person that is buying something, he just has to accept, okay, I'm buying, for instance, 50 tokens of clothing, and those can be just 50 euros, for instance, of clothing. All that is registered onto the blockchain without identifying the actual people in there, and also the FAT protocol allows you to make sure that people cannot spend their money on other things. And at the end, when everything is registered, the shop owner just clicks on a button and it gets sent to the city, and where the city just knows, okay, this is all okay, I'm going to distribute, for instance, a few hundred euros to the shop owner. This means that the whole process is trimmed down from several weeks to almost instantly. If they would like to do it every day, that's fine. It shows that both the city, with their administrative work, it will be drastically reduced, meaning all the tax money going in will be a lot less. It also has the benefit for, of course, the shop owner, because otherwise he has to wait months to get his money. And that is just one example of using the FAT protocol, and of course you can also apply a similar use case, for instance, to provide aid in refugee camps or something like that. There are similar problems over there, people needing medicine, people needing food, they are the same kind of problems, and FAT brings that on top of the Factum protocol, basically almost for free. I just heard we are running out of time. So that's it. Any questions?
Forgive me if I'm asking something you already covered in the first part of your talk.
No problem.
But is the identity protocol that you've been designing, does it take into consideration things like identities that don't belong to people, either
Yep.
lower level like the identity of device, or higher level like identity of groups that have members of multiple identities?
Yeah, it does.
Hierarchy.
There is a hierarchical. You can create hierarchies in it, and you can also grant somebody else the rights, for instance, to use a part of your identity.
So to confirm, the Factum blockchain is now the cheapest, most flexible tokenization and smart contract blockchain.
Agreed. Yeah.
To enter data into the Factum blockchain, use entry credits to buy issue a token using that protocol that they use.
Yeah, so every single token issuance, every single token transaction, every write of a smart contract to in the FAT protocol burns entry credits. It's completely embedded into the Factum protocol.
I've heard a few people talk about the real estate on the blockchain here today. If any of y'all like earnestly explore SEC regulation B 506 exemption A or C as it pertains to raising money for syndicated real estate investments through group of people?
Yeah, so we're currently working with a partner who has a deep experience in exactly that, actually, tokenizing real estate.
Okay, you can do it.
It's complicated. And you know, so for us, we're building out the technology for anybody to build this on. This is completely open source, and we're the technology creators. Then we're partnering with groups like the real estate issuer and other commodity asset holders to basically figure out how the technology works for them. They give us feedback on what sort of regulations they need, so we can do things like write KYC protocols into the FAT protocol. And then, you know, they're the ones who are going to explore all of those regulatory issues. And we're trying to build sort of a base of knowledge in the ecosystem, in the FAT ecosystem, to help people with these regulatory issues. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.